So, if any of you know my show, let's begin as we always do, with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. So, it is, honestly, I gotta tell you something. Some of you have heard we were delayed 10 hours getting here. So I traveled with my daughter, Mary Catherine, who's up here. And if you can't see her, you can see her in the photo. She's there at your far left. As you know, we have 8 children, as you can see. My wife is there, the redhead. And so we traveled here. I always like to travel early because daily Mass has been a part of my life since my reversion to the faith in 1992. And I travel early, even we had to get up at 3 o'clock to get to the airport, so that we can get to Mass. And then we got from, we flew from Ottawa to Montreal for the connection to Denver. And then we were delayed. We were delayed. We're hoping, can we still catch it? Can we still catch it? Nope. That flight, we was delayed till after our next flight left. I was like, oh man. And I was like, to our Lord, so, what's that? Anyway, they rerouted us through Toronto. And so we're like, okay, rerouted through Toronto. We get there at 11:30. And our next flight is 6 p.m., 6:30 p.m. Oh man, guess what? There's a Mass in the airport in Toronto. No kidding. But it doesn't end there. So we go to the 1 o'clock Mass in Toronto in the airport. We had to get out of the airport, go through security, and we had to recheck in and whatever. But, everything is worth Mass. And so we go out. We get into the Mass. I'm not kidding. The priest recognizes me. He's talking to a pilot. And they say, oh, we were just talking about you. And I'm thinking, okay. And then Mass starts. And the priest announces, we're saying Mass today for John Henry Westen and his family and his apostolate. You can't make it up. I wouldn't say it if my daughter wasn't there to be my witness because it's just too weird. But that's the way God acts. And as we heard with Trisha's stories, boy, does he act that way. Oh my gosh. So first thing, you ladies, pray for the redhead in the photo. You know what? Anybody who has a husband who travels knows that's tough. I was, 5 days ago speaking in Buffalo with Kevin. Kevin said to me, I'll see you next week. I was like, what? Yeah, it's here. I had no idea where to go. But it has been a lot of years. Lightsite's now 27 years old. And so our oldest, which is here, the young little girl on this side, is 28 years old. So it's been 28 years of a sacrificial relationship where my wife has borne the brunt of a homeschooling mom, like many of you, of all these guys, all the way through high school too. So it's really beautiful. And I thank you for your prayers. I am really, really, really blessed to be here. My wife makes fun of me because I have this thing, and here's how good God is. He put the thing that I have in today's song at Mass. Honestly, what was the song today? To me, your friends, O God, are made exceedingly honorable. Their principality is exceedingly strengthened. I have this, if I have a spiritual gift, it's seeing Jesus in others. I am so thrilled to meet Holy Catholics. It's a joy for me. So there's so many of you here, and I'm so joyful to be here. In fact, it is, honestly, it's an honor, it's a privilege to address you, the Catholic Mothers of America, and because I know that there's some watching from Canada, there's 2 of you here from Canada, I will say the Catholic Mothers of North America. Also, in speaking to you, I know that I'm actually speaking to the real, living, beating heart of the Catholic Church in America, in North America. And that's you mothers. So, and before you say, because I know I'm talking to a women's talk and not just mothers. I read a quote for you, Alice von Hildebrand. She said, "A woman by her very nature is maternal. For every woman, whether married or unmarried, is called upon to be a biological, psychological, or spiritual mother. She knows intuitively that to give, to nurture, to care for others who suffer with and for them for maternity implies suffering, is infinitely more valuable in God's sight than to conquer nations and fly to the moon," end quote. So yes, I'm addressing you, great mothers of North America, you beating heart of the Church of North America. These quotes from saints on motherhood, you really should pay attention to. I almost know almost all of you will have heard this great one by Cardinal Sanctity. Hands up if you've heard it. Ouch. That's why it's on the slide. Next slide, please. So, this is amazing and so true and beautiful. The most important person on earth is a mother. She cannot claim the honor of having built Notre Dame Cathedral. She need not. She has built something more magnificent than any cathedral, a dwelling for an immortal soul, the tiny perfection of her baby's body. The angels have not been blessed with such a grace. They cannot share in God's creative miracle to bring new saints to heaven. Only a human mother can. Mothers are closer to God, the Creator, than any other creature. God joins forces with mothers in performing this act of creation. What on God's good earth is more glorious than this, to be a mother? So, and here's God for you. I was praying a lot over the last number of months and weeks about what to say. And lo and behold, a new book came out by Dr. Marital. It was on mothers to mothers. And I had it on my show, and it was hilarious because the show aired, I think, today or yesterday. And it's a book for mothers by mother superiors. So this woman, who was a PhD and then became a homeschooling mom, and wondered how she would ever employ her degree, has employed her degree, she's writing books, and she went to interview mother superiors on motherhood. That might sound really strange, but go watch the show, it's interesting. But here's a quote, a couple quotes from a book that I loved and I thought were perfect. A mother, this is the book Mother to Mother by Dr. Marital. A mother doesn't see herself as a servant or slave unless there is no love, and she is resentful of her life. When a woman is a mother who loves, even the most menial tasks, like changing diapers or running errands, are not below her dignity because it is her place in the family. We can see these tasks as opportunities to love or as degrading duties that must get done in the drudgery of the day. And this is what makes a world of difference. Another quote, same book, same theme. Imagine how many times Our Lady hauled water from the well, stoked the fire, or set the table for dinner. She was always glad to do it because in doing every action for and with Jesus, she was saving souls. When preoccupied with saving souls through the offering of prayer and works, how can life be boring? Imagine that, when I speak to young people, I often use this example. Do you remember when you were young and your dad or mom came to your door on Saturday morning and went, "Time to go and do the chores"? And you were like, "What?" So one day you sleep in. And that kind of, ouch, you might say some things or think some things anyway that aren't too charitable. Same situation. Honestly, same situation. And Jesus is at your door. And our Lord himself asks you to do the same chore. You would jump out of bed, you would be so happy, your heart would be on fire, you would be doing everything the best you could. Jesus asked you to. Guess what? That's the same thing. Except the saints recognized it. Our Lady, you can say that's cheating. It was Jesus when she was changing it. But she recognized it. So, do you remember the story of St. Teresa of Avila? It was really neat. St. Teresa of Avila, she loved Jesus so much, and she was given that vision. And our Lord gives her a cross to choose. Which cross would you like? And being St. Teresa of Avila, of course, she goes up to the heaviest cross, and she says, this one. And our Lord says, no. Because that cross is reserved for married persons. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. And having just listened to Trish's story, you might know what that means. But there's a lot of saint quotes about mothers and women. I encourage you to look them up. A lot of them are great. I really like Zélie Martin, the mother of St. Therese, also of 5 nuns. And I like her quotes not so much because she was a saint. You know, the 2 of them, the Martin, Louis and Zélie, but her quotes are so real. They feel so real. Let me give you just one. Now, remember, she was like a businesswoman too. She was an expert sewer, and they were also raising a large family and everything else. So here's what she says. Maybe you can relate. Oh, well, that's the day so far, and it's only still noon. If this continues, I will be dead by this evening. You see, at the moment, life seems to be so heavy for me to bear, and I don't have the courage because everything looks black to me. And it's noon. I was talking to one of the ladies at the coffee station here, and I was looking at the cups thinking, yeah, I only drink 1 coffee a day. The mug is about 10 times the size of this cup. And her response was, yeah, that's my glass of wine. It only takes 1 bottle to fill. Notice how you won't mention any names, though. So, coming from Trisha's talk, it really reminded me of something. And this is why when I do a talk, it's prepped until the last second, because I'm sitting here listening to all this going, oh, that, I gotta do that. And so, Trisha's talk brought up something for me in a very powerful way, and that was that men and women are different. Has anybody seen the ad on television or YouTube for the manslater? The manslater. It's a great thing. It's a device. It's a fake device, but it's a device that tells the man what the woman is actually saying. So it's the same, actually, that Kevin gave. Remember the, honey, the guys are getting together, and then they asked me to come. She's like, oh. And she's sitting on the couch in front of the TV, like, and she says, sure. And he's like, yes. And he's going, and the manslater says, no, don't go. So he goes back on the couch. He says, you know what, honey? I think I'm just going to stay home and watch some, I don't know, whatever show with you. She's like, oh, that's wonderful. So it's true. So this is going to sound bad, but I have to say it. Men speak English. With women, there's another language. There really, really is. I'm going to give you an example in my own life. When I grow up, I'm going to write How to Be a Catholic Husband for Dummies, because I've been married now 30 years, and I'm over 50, and that's how long it took me to get to anywhere near this, which is not where I should be, but it's just, this little bit, but you'll see. So, I remember this is over a decade ago, and one Saturday morning, well, let me back up just to be fair. So every day this week, it was during the spring, my wife was looking at the window, and she would say, oh, the grass is growing. So I'd look at the window and say, it is. And as the week went on, the grass is getting long. It is. Saturday night. So this is 10:30 at night, and we're in Canada, so it's pitch black. There's no light. And she's really upset. And I say, honey, what's wrong? She said, I've been asking you all week to cut the lawn, and you never did. And I will confess how dense I truly am. I replied, you never once asked me to cut the lawn. I'm going to put on the headlamp right now and go and cut the lawn. Now, even though I was ready to do that, she didn't let me do that, but I did cut it the next day. But what is that? So, women speak a different language. It's not English. It's some hinting thing that men are really not good at. After maybe 30 years of marriage, we start to get the hint, but it took a long time. So, there is a great psychologist. He's not a Catholic, but he's a Christian and he reads his Bible very much. His name is James Dobson. And he writes many books. I'm going to recommend one if you're interested. It's called Straight Talk to Men and Their Wives. And he talks about the differences between men and women. And one thing he says is so striking, it's the whole book, but I'm going to summarize it for you in 2 sentences. He says, to men, to husbands, the best thing you can do for your children. Now, at that point, all the guys are listening. I know it's going to be like, go out with them, show them the ropes, make it hard. No. The best thing you could do for your children is love your wife. Love your wife? Okay. But the genius of Dobson is he turns to the women. And what's he going to say? The best thing you can do is love your husband, right? Wrong. He says the best thing you can do for your children is honor your husband. What? Why is that? No, come on. You know it's in the Bible. You know that's in the Bible. So, Ephesians 5, which everybody hates nowadays. I'm going to read you the Durex version, as Father Nick's told us, the only version that's completely accurate, but let's read from that. So, it does say in verse 21, what everybody says today. It says about husband and wives, be subject to one another for the fear, in the fear of Christ. That's what everybody says. But then, when addressing wives and husbands independently and specifically, it's totally different. He says to the women, let women be subject to their husbands as to the Lord, because the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. He is the Savior of his body. Therefore, as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be subject to their husbands in all things. And then husbands, it's obeying your wives. No, it's not. It's totally different. It's husbands, love your wives, as Christ also loved the church and delivered himself up for it. James Dobson got it out of the Bible. Oh, yeah, I guess there are those Bible-believing Christians. They do. They read and meditate on the Word of God, and it comes out in their writing, especially when they really pay attention. And boy, did he nail that. There's a huge difference. And then, being the kind of husband I am, I wondered, love your wife. What does that mean exactly? Jesus was sort of super specific about the wives obey, honor, respect, whatever you want to term, but your husband. And that one's pretty obvious, at least it was in my mind. And I know there's some guys in the room, so I'm going to do this one because here's how embarrassing it is. Love your wife. I do love my wife. I tell my wife I love my wife. Is that good enough? And again, it's in the Bible. Ouch. In fact, it's engraved on my wedding ring, but that's another story. It's 1 Corinthians 1:3. Love is what? Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It does not boast. It's not proud. It's not ambitious. It's not self-seeking. It is not provoked to anger. It thinks no evil. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always preserves. So that's a tall order. And boy, does that fit for husbands. Okay, so there's this thing that I didn't know for not quite 30 years, but well past 20 years. Because you always think, as a guy, you want to be heroic. You want to be like, I'm strong, I can do this. And what you don't know is that you're fighting all your impatience. And let's go through the list: your impatience, your selfishness, your envy, your boastfulness, your pride. And you're sort of stomping it down. And you know what? It still comes out. It comes out in those looks, or sighs, or grunts, or something. And that, totally unbeknownst to men, women understand. That's their language again. And so your wife will typically go, what's wrong? Nothing? Did I say something? No. It's, you didn't say something. And the men honestly are like, is that a thing? Like, really? So, Trish talked about fasting. So there's a thing about fasting, okay? We tried fasting. I had her husband's thing, I'm starting to lose it by midday, a lot earlier than in my later years. And I do shows all the time, and I'm like, dude, this is no good. So typically you give up fasting altogether. No, you shouldn't do that, but that's what you tend to do. But anyway, there's this really neat quote from St. John Chrysostom about fasting. He says, yeah, you fast off food and you devour your family. Wow. I knew that was a problem a long time ago when my wife was saying, please don't fast. And she didn't say it like Chrysostom, but the message got there. So, okay, a really quick aside. There's a solution to that. It's like salt in your water. Go look it up. It actually works. But anyway, that's a total aside. So you can fast well and for a long time and still maintain your mental acuity. It's amazing. Anyway, so this also works for men because once a month there's an issue with your wife. That's an entendre many times, forget double, but there's a point to that because God made it that way so you would have to exercise your patience, your kindness, your understanding, your forgiveness. It's very real. So the Bible is full of these very interesting things. And I came across something, and I was talking to Father Nolan. See, this is the problem when you love to be around holy people so much. You just talk and talk, and it was amazing. I got to spend time with Trisha and then with Father. And Father said something very interesting. We were talking about men and women and so on. And we got to talking about women and what they do. And something struck me, and I mentioned to him, I said, women do something that men don't. They notice things. You ever notice a guy will walk into a home and go, okay, let's have in our place like this. Let's have people over. No, the house is just, I'm like, no one's gonna look. I would come back from my friend's place and my wife would get a call from her friend. Oh, your husband came in? We were ready. My wife asked me, did you notice their house? Yes. Was there anything you noticed? I saw my friend. We had a beer. Yeah. But that's guys. They don't notice. There's this joke in our house about looking for things in the fridge. So my wife, after over a decade of marriage, got to responding to every time, it's on the second shelf at the back. Didn't matter what it was. By the time you look at the second chapter, you will always find it. Men don't notice. And do you know that's biblical? It is. Adam and Eve. Adam's walking around the garden, he's doing his thing. Eve notices the fruit. Now the devil tempts her with it, whatever, but Eve notices. She's like, oh, the fruit looks good to eat. And then the devil with the lies about how, well, look at you, like, it'd be like God. Adam didn't notice. Eve takes the bite of the apple. So was that there with Adam and Eve? It's also there with the new Adam and the new Eve. Jesus is at the party at Cana, and he's having a great time. And he doesn't notice that they're out of wine. The new Eve notices, son, they're out of wine. What does he respond? What does that have to do with you and me? My time has not yet come. That response holds a lot. Think about what that means. What does it mean, my time has not yet come? His time is to go to Calvary. That's the whole point. He spent 30 years before that in the family. And his time is to go to Calvary. He knew that if he would set that clock going, that's what it would mean. And so did Our Lady. She knew from the time he was a baby, she knew that he was to save the world. She knew, the evangelicals have that, song, Mary, did you know that you made the boy? And it's really frustrating. So I have to say, okay, so I've changed it. That only she knew that her baby. That's not going back to me. Because she didn't know it. Her feeling was the knowing yes. So, the new Eve and the old Eve both noticed, but they both counseled, advised, convinced their Adams differently. The old Eve convinced the old Adam to act in her self-interest, in his self-interest. And the new Eve encouraged her Adam to sacrifice. That would cost not only the new Adam, that would cost the new Eve, the co-redemptrix. Now, there's a really interesting way I got to know about that truth. It actually came from fundraising for LifeSite. I noticed, because I'm asked to speak to a lot of our donors, especially our bigger donors, and go and meet with them and whatnot, and I noticed something. I noticed that most of the time, it's the women who encourage their husbands to donate. Because they noticed. And it's stunning. Women notice. So, I have some things for you to notice. I want to show you a slide. This is Pope John Paul II, before he was Pope John Paul II, it's cardinal in 1976, or even as bishop. He came to America, to Philadelphia, directly across from us, but way on the other side. And he said this: "We are now standing in the face of the greatest historical confrontation that humanity has ever experienced. I do not think that the widest circle of the American society or the whole wide circle of the Christian community realize this fully. We are now facing the final confrontation between the church and the anti-church, between the gospel and the anti-gospel, between Christ and the antichrist. The confrontation lies within the plans of divine providence. It is therefore in God's plan, and it must be a trial which the church must take up and face courageously." I want you to notice something. The year is 1976. And John Paul is not talking about World War. He is not talking about, calamity in America. He's talking about a war inside the church. The final confrontation between the church and the anti-church, between the gospel and the anti-gospel, between Christ and the antichrist. The confrontation lies within the plans of divine providence. That's huge. And said in America for some odd reason. Why America? Well, let's go to the next slide. Father Nix, in his talk, mentioned this. It's very interesting. This is why all these things keep coming and these presentations keep coming. I have to amend my talk all the time. But this is great. Cardinal Mario Luigi Chiappi, who we mentioned, he was the personal theologian to 5 popes, and he read the Third Secret of Fatima. And he said, in a personal letter to Professor Baumgartner of Salzburg, Austria, Cardinal Luigi Chiappi said, and I quote, "In the Third Secret is foretold, among other things, that the great apostasy in the church begins at the top." So let's go on, because that's actually confirmed as well by Pope Benedict. In 2010, Pope Benedict was in a flight to Portugal, and he was asked about Akita, and he said this: "As for the new things which we can find in his message today," that's the message of Fatima, "today we are seeing it in a really terrifying way, that the greatest persecution of the church comes not from her enemies without, but rises from her enemies within the church." That was specific only to Fatima, but in another talk, he basically said that the messages of Akita and Fatima are the same. And isn't it interesting that we have, next slide please. So, you know I'm a news guy, right? So I try to stay up to date. Look at the death date of Sister Agnes. It was the Assumption just a few days ago. And Our Lady appeared to Sister Agnes, who was, by the way, deaf when cured. She had a stigmata type wound on her hands. The statue bled 101 times. The statue wept. The bishop, John Ito, he said this was a supernatural origin. On October the 13th, the anniversary of the miracle of the sun at Fatima, in 1973, Our Lady said to her, "The work of the devil will infiltrate even into the church in such a way that one will see cardinals opposing cardinals and bishops against other bishops." Again, 1973, John Paul comes here, or Wojtyła comes here, and says that in 76. Next slide, please. And then we have this feast day, just a few days ago, St. John Eudes. This is incredible how our Lord leads up to in each of our little lives, because we're nobodies, but he does this very personal thing with us. So he gives me this from a few days ago. Again, read these words. This is St. John Eudes' feast day a few days ago. "The most evident mark of God's anger and the most terrible castigation he can inflict upon the world are manifested when he permits his people to fall into the hands of clergy who are priests more in name than in deed, priests who practice the cruelty of rabbiting wolves rather than charity and affection of devoted shepherds. When God permits such things, it is a very positive proof that he is thoroughly angry with his people and is visiting his most dreadful anger upon them. That's why he cries unceasingly to Christians, 'Return, O faithless children, and I will give you pastors according to my own heart, who will feed you with knowledge and understanding.' Thus, irregularities in the lives of priests constitute a scourge upon the people in consequence of sin." Unbelievable. Next slide, please. So, now I'm going to say some things to you that are going to be hard to hear. But you have to hear them, and you have to notice. So, this is Cardinal Godfrey Daniels. You'll see him here in a rainbow psalm. That's nothing new. What was new was that he is the only cardinal caught on tape covering up sexual abuse. Not just covering it up. There was an abuse victim who was abused as a child, who as an adult went to see the cardinal to say that he was going to come out with a story about the abuse he suffered. The cardinal was the friend of the bishop who did the abuse, who was the uncle of the boy, now man. the cardinals caught on tape, because it was a secretly taped conversation, and still go listen to it, caught on tape, it's not in English, mind you, but caught on tape saying, don't, he's retiring next year. Look to your own sins. So it's huge. This guy was pro-abortion. He told the King of Belgium it was okay to sign the legislation line for abortion. You can see his thought on the church's teaching on homosexuality by what he's wearing. But even in terms of the world, this guy is way outside the box. I did not watch the election of Pope Francis. But had I watched it, I would have seen this man on the balcony with him. Now, the previous slide, please, still, if you don't mind, sorry. Yeah, Cardinal Daniels was on the balcony. We learned much later that Cardinal Daniels was involved in electing Pope Francis. He reveals in a biography done that he was part of what he called the Sagal Mafia that tried to elect Francis in 2005, opposing Benedict, and then got him elected in 2013. His testimony. So there's that. So as this was going on though, so again, day one, I didn't catch this. I'm thinking, okay, Pope from Latin America, that's kind of cool, we haven't seen that before. But day three, I was, oh my goodness, Lord help us, this is very scary. What happened on day three? Day three, Pope Francis praised Cardinal Walter Casper. Now, any of you who are older will remember him as Casper the Friendly Ecumenist. He was the man who would go and visit Israel and talk about the need not to convert the Jews. Mother Miriam, who does a daily show for LifeSite, you can see it's called Mother Miriam Live, very much like Mother Angelica Live of yesteryear from EWTN. She told me once in an interview, the greatest harm that we could ever do to the Jews is keep from them Jesus Christ. And she, by the way, is a former Jew, and she was including the Holocaust in her consideration. So, day three, we're like, oh boy, that's something, that's really not good, because the Pope said of Casper that he's a theologian who does theology on the knees. We thought, oh boy, oh boy. But something else weird happened, because the Pope asked Cardinal Casper to deliver the first addresses at what became known as the First Extraordinary Synod on the Family in 2014. And what were his addresses about? They were actually about a debate he had back in the 80s with Cardinal Ratzinger and Pope John II. He, Lehmann, and a bunch of other German bishops wanted to allow for divorce and remarriage. Wanted to allow specifically for divorce, remarriage, and communion. But no, that wasn't possible, and it was squashed. Except that then came Synod 1 and Synod 2 on the family, and then came Amoris Laetitia. Something very interesting though, the homosexual activists always tell me the same thing. When I'm out arguing with them, they're always like, Jesus never mentioned homosexuality, so there's that. And for the most part, they're right. Jesus did talk about some, but it wasn't very specific. St. Paul's got all the specifics in the world, but that's not Jesus himself. But Jesus was super specific about divorce and remarriage. If you leave your wife, you commit adultery. There was no wiggle room in Jesus. Yet, that's what they went for first, with Amoris Laetitia. And then some people said, oh, Morris, that doesn't really do it. You can interpret it if you do mental gymnastics to be the right way. And then out came the Acta Apostolicae Sedis, which is like the rule book for bishops. And in there, it was called authentic magisterium, that interpretation was the only interpretation. So things got real severe. But we should have known, because this also happened. Next slide, please. So this guy was removed right at the beginning. Why? So everybody knows Cardinal Burke. He was like the most holiest bishop in America. And then if you learn the backstory, he basically got shipped out to Rome because they didn't like him here. But God's ways are not man's ways, so he did amazing work in Rome. He became the head of the Apostolic Signature, like the Supreme Court in Rome. But when Pope Francis got in, he was rude. He was removed in a way that, like, I've been a reporter, we've been doing this now 27 years actively, even 2 years before that I was doing it. So it's 29 years of paying attention to what goes on in the Vatican. If they had a really bad guy, they kick him upstairs. They give him a plum post. This cancellation, you know what he was given from the head of the Supreme Court at the Vatican? He was given chaplain of the Order of Malta. Nothing against the Order of Malta, it's amazing. But that's what he was placed as. He was actually even removed from that after a few years as well. To another, next slide, please. When that happened, we did a petition at LifeSite for Cardinal Burke. 30,000 people signed to give their love to Cardinal Burke. And it was an amazing thing to do. And that is a great thanks to you. I know many of you probably signed that as well. Next slide, please. But it's not over yet. Cardinal Burke has been, doing his thing, fighting for the truth of the faith in Rome. But just a little while ago, Pope Francis removed him again, this time from his apartment in Rome and his salary. Now that's really weird. All the cardinals in Rome have a place. They basically live across the street from St. Peter's. It's a Vatican property too. It's nice in terms of its location. It's the nicest thing in the world. But in terms of its, inside the apartments, they're kind of austere. They've got a chapel. The chapel's nice. But, there's nothing, you're not in, the Ritz-Grand Carlton anywhere. You're just in a normal place that is a really old place. But it's still, it's clean and nice and tidy, but it's nothing extravagant. It's large because it has a chapel and a kitchen and a place where the cardinals can receive guests and whatnot, like a library. But it's not much. The Pope will move him from it. Next slide, please. So we should have known from the beginning something's really up. Because the Pope has also been very consistent in what he said from the beginning of his papacy to today about his dislike for conservative Catholics, particularly American conservative Catholics. And I'm not kidding. When he got in, there's a blog called Marital, and there was an interesting article from someone in Buenos Aires who said he hates Americans and he hates Catholics. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's day one, what are you doing? But it must surely seem to have played out. But listen, this is just from a little while ago, if you can play that, please.
Conservative bishops in the United States that oppose your new efforts to revisit teachings and traditions. How do you address their criticism?
You used an adjective, conservative. That is, conservative is one who clings to something and does not want to see beyond that. It is a suicidal attitude. Because one thing is to take tradition into account, to consider situations from the past, but quite another is to be closed up inside a dogmatic box.
Pope Pius XI said, men must look for the peace of Christ in the kingdom of Christ. And he urged that the faithful give public honor to Christ the King so that individuals and states would submit once more to the rule of their Savior. And that is why LifeSite News is raising up the image of Christ the King across the United States. And you can help us reach millions more. Please pledge your support today for these billboards at lifefunder.com/Christ is King.
So we talked here already about a dogmatic box. Dogmatic box is what we're supposed to have. You can talk about inside the dogma of the church. There's lots of room to play and have great debates. I think you said that, Father. And so I'm listening very carefully to what you're saying. So this problem, the dogmas can't change. But this has been very consistent from the beginning. And this has been really hard, especially for me. We came out of very close relations with the Vatican for many, many years. Under JP2, under Benedict. I was actually called to go and speak at the Vatican to commemorate, or pray at the Vatican anyway, to commemorate Evangelium Vitae. And it was in 2013. It was right after Pope Francis came in. It was planned under Benedict. I got called by the priest. There was only 3 pro-life leaders who were actually going to do the actual praying in St. Peter's and stuff, and I was one of them. And I told the priest, but Pope Francis hasn't been big on pro-life stuff, you know? And he said, no, this is his opportunity. He's been waiting for this. And I was like, oh, okay, that's great. And it went. Yeah, there was nothing in the homily, but I did meet the Holy Father. I, was with him and so on. But talks with priests after in Rome, theologians, heads of places that I shouldn't mention. But anyway, lots of them. I said, so what are we going to do? The answer was for many of them, including higher prelates, higher ranking prelates. And a couple of them said the same thing: keep your head down in the long grass. It's some Italian saying. You know, it'll pass. I said, I can't. I'll give you a story with the cardinal, who, I have to be careful now, so that's who I knew quite well, who would talk to me a lot. We've had interviews before. And I went to talk to him. This was in 2016. Amoris Laetitia is already out now. The Dubia is out, the famous Dubia from Cardinal Berg and Cardinal Cafara and Cardinal Pantvilla and Meissen. And the 4 Dubia cardinals are basically asking the Pope, hey, here's the tradition of the church. Is it meshing with what you said? I don't think so. Very polite, as you would expect from Cardinal Berg, like the most gentle guy in the world. And so I asked this cardinal, can we talk about the Dubia? No, I won't talk about these things with journalists. First time he'd ever called me a journalist in many years. And I was like, well, oh, okay. Well, can we just do what we were doing before? I'll ask you about the issues, and we'll never mention that, but the issues are there anyway, because no. I want my contribution in my final years to be something positive. I was like, oh, okay then. Honestly, it felt like time to get up and leave. We didn't, we talked about something friendly and nice and said goodbye. And as I was saying goodbye, I said, Eminence, thank you for talking about this with your brother Cardinals, because it's really important. Last week, or whatever it was, like a month ago or whatever, on July 16, 2016, when Pope Francis said cohabitation is real marriage and has the grace of real marriage, he was talking about, people in northern Argentina where the men are afraid to get married, and so they live together and have children. By the time they have grandchildren, they get married. But he said cohabitation is real marriage, has the grace of real marriage. I was at a car garage getting my car fixed as that was happening. I was, trying to type it out. CNN headline: Pope says cohabitation is real marriage, has the grace of real marriage. That night I got a call from my daughter, one of my children. Anyway, we'll exit from the record. One of my children, who was in college at the time, who said, Dad, did the Pope really say cohabitation is real marriage and it's the grace of real marriage? So I said to the Cardinal, it's very important that you talk to your brother cardinals about this, because it's harming our children. I asked him, should I have lied to my daughter? To say, no, the media made that up, he didn't really say it. His response was, did he really say that? I said, I can show you the video. And then he said this: even if I, or an angel from heaven, were to come and give you a different gospel, let it be anathema. Quoting from St. Paul to Timothy. But the key point there was this cardinal saying, did he really say that? So the cardinals are to be the ones who work with the Pope. It's not even my job as much as it is theirs to pay attention to what the Pope is up to. And that's what I knew. This is 2016, by the way. So we've already gone through 13, 14, 15 in this nightmare, which is now for us like a constant reality. And he was asking me, did he really say that? Next slide, please. So, Our Lady Fatima came in 1917. And Our Lady Fatima is going to come back through this talk because it's really key. Because she came to warn us about something. We heard from Cardinal Chiampi that it's not so much about, wars and all that stuff. It's more about the church, corruption inside the church. You get that from Nikita very, very clearly. You also get that, let me first tell you this. So, one of the first visions from Fatima, she shows little children, 6, 8, and 10, hell. Like, really? Like, if you're the mom or the parent, like, oh, sure, that one, that's just, no, hey, what are you doing? But it was so important. And it was so severe. Lucia said, we would have died had she not told us we were going to heaven. So she shows them hell. But why? Because she knew that teaching, which Lucia said, she watched the souls fall into hell like snowflakes. She was interviewed, by the way, by a priest who had this theory that, maybe nobody's in hell. And he tried to interview Lucia. And she said, he asked her 3 times whether that would be like meshing somehow with what other lady said. No, there are many souls in hell. No, there are many souls in hell. She's only quoting our Lord, by the way. Broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many there are that go therein. Narrow is the road that leads to life, and few there are that find it. Ow. You're going to have to take it up with Jesus if you want to say that hell is empty. But Pope Francis has said that numerous times. In fact, he said it first as a rumor, second as an interview with Scalfari. Scalfari is Eugenio Scalfari, he's a communist. He writes in La Repubblica, and he's a very well-known communist in Rome. And the Pope loves reading La Repubblica, and it's been interviewed many, many, many times by Scalfari. Scalfari is controversial also because he sort of listens to the interview, goes home and does it. He doesn't take notes while he does it. But he wrote that he asked the Pope about this. He's an atheist. And so he asked the Pope, what if, everyone goes to heaven, but what if you really don't want to go? Isn't Jesus going to force you into heaven? And according to Scalfari, the Pope responds, no, then the soul is annihilated. Whoops, that's a heresy. But the Vatican could respond by going, well, that's Scalfari, he doesn't take the notes, and blah, blah, blah. But the Pope will go again, and again, and again, to other interviews with him. But then he says it himself. And then he says it inside an official document of the church. Remember we mentioned Amoris Laetitia? If you go read it, read the theologian's critique of it, saying that it's full of heresies, you will read this line from the document. No one is condemned forever. That is not the message of the gospel. So, okay, again, you're wondering what that is, but I like to be a news guy, so it has to be current. So I want to give you news from this month. Pope Francis held the first World Day for Children at the Vatican. Here's the comedian who was there. You see the Pope there with him. You see the children on stage. There's 10,000 children in front of them. Can you play?
Non può toccare il Papa, no! Ho detto, ma come? Ora io da quando me l'hanno detto ho voglia di fare solo quello. Sapete, non abbiate paura perché non esistono il
Don't be afraid because there's no hell. Purgatory, there's no hell, there's no purgatory.
Studiate, che è la cosa più bella del mondo, perché siamo tutti insieme. Siamo tutti insieme.
And there's the Pope clapping. This is in front of 10,000 children. I'm a reporter. I report. So, next slide, please. So, he had already gone down the road of the most severe thing where Jesus was so super specific, but you never think he would do like the most avant-garde, crazy thing we have today. Forget homosexuality and all that. He'd go for the trans. No way, come on. Didn't he say that, gender ideology is bad? Yes, he did. Except there's also this. We reported this in 2015. The Pope asked a transgender couple. That person over there on your right is a woman who's taken drugs, hormones for so long. She's not got facial hair. She's removed her breasts and everything else. And the Pope brought them to the Vatican and had this photo taken. We published it in 2015. Honestly, people did not believe us until in 2016, the Pope revealed the story himself on the plane. Next slide. Hit play if you would mind. On October 2nd, 2016, on his return flight from his papal visit to Georgia and Azerbaijan, the Pope referred to a woman who, quote, felt like a man, but, quote, was physically a young woman, end quote. Oh, did it stop there?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. He goes on to say that they were married and happy. So, it doesn't end there. So, that was that. Next slide, please. This is Sister Cremona on your left. She's called the Nun of the Trans. The Pope praises her very often because of her great work with her, and I quote, girls. I kid you not. And this is one of her trans girls, who of course is a man. Hit play. This biological man, who claims to be a woman, calls himself Lizzie Tagliani. And in a video in which he acts as an on-location reporter for a TV show, he walks around an outdoor Catholic celebration where he speaks with several people in the crowd, eventually speaking also with an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion who's actually distributing Holy Communion in the crowd. So I stopped the video there because I don't want to show you what happens next. That woman that he is talking to is the Eucharistic minister, and she gives him Holy Communion. He receives it, making a funny sign of the cross, and laughs with the producer who's back in the studio, saying, oh wow, and he responds, yes, Pope Francis said make a mess. Next slide, please. So, this has come to America. This is the first trans religious approved by the bishop. When it became an issue, because this obvious woman named Nicole, who so-called transitioned, has become a Catholic religious hermit in the Diocese of Lexington, Kentucky. Approved by Bishop John Snow. It was really something, you know, because when this was found out, because she made it public, people were like, whoa, what's the diocese saying? The diocese response was this, watch. This is from the diocesan website. I can't put the whole thing on, but on Pentecost Sunday, Brother Christian Manson, whose name's Nicole Manson, by the way, a professed hermit in the Diocese of Lexington, has made it public that he is a transgendered person. Brother Christian has long sought to consecrate his life to Christ and the Church by living the evangelical counsels of poverty, chastity, and obedience. He has been consistently been accompanied by a competent spiritual director and has undergone formation for the Benedictine tradition. He does not seek ordination, but has professed a rule of life that allows him to support himself financially by continuing his work in the arts and to live a life of contemplation in a private hermitage. Bishop John Stowe, OFM, convention, accepted his profession and is grateful to Brother Christian for his witness of discipleship, integrity, and contemplative prayer for the Church. This is America, and this is accepted and allowed and promoted. And this is the edge of where society is at. There's more. Next slide, please. This is Pope Francis at another celebration at the Vatican for children, hit play.
Oggi allo Stadio Olimpico di Roma per la giornata mondiale dei bambini in detta da Papa Francesco. Sono veramente emozionatissimo e non vedo l'ora di far vedere questo spettacolo a tutti i bambini provenienti da ogni angolo del mondo. E quale spettacolo migliore se non il giro del mondo in 10 minuti? Venite con me.
Remember, this is the Vatican event. In his speech there, he said he thanks the Holy Father, Papa Francesco, for allowing this for the children. Now, I'm sorry to show you these things, but you know what? You need to know. You need to know. Because the cardinals don't know. But you need to know. So then you have what's coming up next. Hold that for a second. There is someone who speaks out. Most don't. Where are the bishops and the cardinals of the world? How many of them have you heard speak out about most of the things I've showed you so far? There is one who does. He's from America. And he was just removed.
To be very serious and very clear about what the truth is, because flirting with all these false messages and being confusing and being conflicted and corrupt, that is not the church. It's children. And we're playing with fire when we continue to, cooperate with evil. And we better wake up as a church, as humanity. The Old Testament illustrates that he can reach a point where there are corrections. And, I think we're nearing that point. Pope Francis, you need to act in this case. You need to remove anyone and everyone who allowed this to happen, because it is evil. Evil is dancing in the Vatican, and we cannot sit on our hands and quietly say, oh, that's too bad, or oh, that's not very nice. It is evil, and it needs to be called out. Every cardinal there should be demanding that this be stopped immediately, not a few studies down the road. Now, the corruption of children, it's bad not to see it in public libraries in our country, but for the church to allow it and probably promote it, frankly, that has to stop. And they can do whatever they want to do further to me, but that demands an outcry that should be loud and strong and clear for the sake of the children and for the sake of the church.
Now, the one line he said at the end is very important. They can do whatever they want further to me. There's that sacrifice we were talking about. I'm going to skip some things, but just mention briefly, what we're talking about is not even this. Next slide. The Pachamama idolatry in the gardens. Do you remember that? Yes. So they're all kneeling in front of Pachamama statues. Next slide. People said the Pope was sitting right there. This is him blessing it right after the ceremony. But it got much worse. They processed it into the Vatican itself and then prayed around it. Next slide. There's the Pope with the cardinals praying around it. And then, next slide. So Canada had its own version. When the Pope came to Canada in 2015, a shaman prayed to the circle of the Western grandmother to open the circle of spirits so that they could come and join them there, and blew on the sacred bone whistle. And all the cardinals and the Pope had their hands on their chests, eyes closed, praying along with this. We were there in the anteroom, which showed it. We weren't allowed into the main room because we weren't one of the accepted journalists. But nonetheless, we were there, and it was unreal. Next slide. In case you don't see the Pope, there you see the Pope praying along with it as well. And this is, anyway, next slide, please. So those were the things that I'm going to skip because it's just too unbelievable to even, the videos are there, just watch the videos because it's just unreal. I want to talk about an issue that's very near and dear to my heart because we're Life Site, we're all about pro-life. And you'd think, oh, the Pope would never go there. Yeah. So this is Emma Bonino. She is the best known abortion proponent in Italy. She was an illegal abortionist. I spared you the photo of her committing an abortion, which is publicly available. But she committed like 10,000 abortions and fled the country because it was still illegal at the time. She came back, became a politician, helped to legalize abortion, same-sex marriage, every homosexual, pro-contraception, divorce thing you can imagine. Pope Francis said of her, she's one of Italy's forgotten greats because he likes her work on immigration. He's met with her so many times that she goes to speak in Catholic churches in Italy, I kid you not. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, she was stomping mad and let everybody know. So there's that. But you'd think, oh, well, you know, that's a one-off. He likes to work on immigration. It's not a big deal. No, it's a big deal. It's a huge deal. John Paul II, back in the 80s, called on pro-life groups worldwide to come to the United Nations to fight population control. And then Pope Francis came in and he kicked out the very leaders of the Pontifical Academy for Life who were called by John Paul to do that job. You heard in the intro that I'm a member of the executive of the new John Paul II Academy for Human Life and the Family. Those are the old guys who John Paul founded the Pontifical Academy for Life with, who were removed. And then he removed the pro-life pledge at the Pontifical Academy for Life, and then invited pro-aborts on. But then, and I kid you not, the Vatican started to flip on population control, literally flip 180 degrees, and started promoting it, for real. In fact, even the bishop that heads up the Academy for Science said at a conference that I was at, this, listen for yourself.
The idea of the church that we need education because it's not only the ends of the marriage is not only to have children, but to educate the children and also the person to have children, the woman and the man. And many priests say to me that the great solution for the question of procreation is the education of the woman. Because when we have education, we don't have children. We don't have 7 children. Maybe we have 1 child, 2 children, no more.
Yeah, there's that. If you didn't understand it, he's talking about educating women so you have 1 or 2 children, no more, not 7 children. That sounds familiar. It should, because remember Pope Francis on the plane with the comment about the mother having 7 children. He was talking about C-section, mind you. But he said that's irresponsible. What's needed is responsible parenting. That same conference invited the head of the population control movement, Paul Ehrlich is the author of the 1968 population bomb that was he's called sort of the father of population, or population control. But he was invited to the Vatican. We did a petition, over 10,000 people signed, begging the Holy Father, please, please don't do this. That fell on deaf ears. So we interviewed Paul Ehrlich. Yeah, that's what we do. We're a media organization, so we actually go out there and interview people. And he said he was really pleased with the way Pope Francis, with the direction Pope Francis was taking the church. At that conference, you had pro-aborts arguing for population control, the need for contraception, the need to bring down the world population. It's the exact opposite of what John Paul II asked us to do. It's the exact opposite of what Pope Benedict talked about, because they both fought it. So, it also appears with another American bishop. Next slide, please. Oh wait, was that a video? Just if you can go back one. Play that for a second. Is that playing?
Yeah, that was the last one.
Okay. It doesn't play though. That video doesn't play.
Trying to replay it.
Oh, it did play.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. I think that was one of them. So another American bishop. This is Archbishop Salvatore Corleone. Heroic bishop, especially because he's on the West Coast. I mean, that's just incredible. He's in San Francisco, of all places. So, Archbishop Corleone, he decided to, after 10 years of counseling his person in his diocese, Nancy Pelosi, on being pro-life instead of pro-abortion, and calling herself a faithful Catholic and receiving Holy Communion all the time, after 10 years of trying to get to her, he finally said that's enough. He was employing Canon 915, which is about public obstinate sinners not receiving Holy Communion. It was, in fact, the instruction from the Vatican under John Paul II to the American Bishops' Conference as they debated the question of communion for pro-abortion politicians in 2004. Cardinal Ratzinger, at the time he was the head of the CDF, wrote on behalf of Pope John Paul II to the committee deciding that the Minister for Holy Communion must deny Holy Communion. The head of the Committee of the Bishops of America decided not to reveal that to his brother bishops. His name was Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. After the decision was made and they finished, this letter got leaked on a few websites. And one of those websites was LifeSite. We were called liars. It's a fake news. Except that the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, headed under Ratzinger, said, no, not fake news, it's real. They said, yep, that's the letter we issued. And then Cardinal Burke, who was on the committee, other bishops, or he was bishop at the time, said, hey, we would have liked to know about the letter. But that was passed. Next slide, please. So, here's Nancy. Nancy Pelosi snubs Archbishop Corleone's communion, and she, again, received Mass in Washington, D.C., where the Cardinal Archbishop Wilton Gregory happily gives her Holy Communion. Because Wilton Gregory is... Anyway. So, there's that. But it gets much more troubling. Next slide. So, Pelosi went to the Vatican and received Holy Communion at a papal mass. And this is unreal, because what I'm going to tell you next makes it mind-boggling. Next slide, please. So, Pope Francis openly criticized Archbishop Corleone. In this Reuters interview, he didn't name him, but he said that the church loses its pastoral care when communion is denied to pro-abortion Catholic politicians, and it causes a political problem. And he referred specifically, I can't scroll down for you here because it's a slide, but he referred specifically to American bishops who do that. Next slide, please. Okay, one back, just go one back for a second. So this gets even more surreal when you realize that on that day, one slide back. One more slide back if you don't mind. On this day, the day that Nancy Pelosi came to the Vatican and received Holy Communion in the Vatican, Pope Francis issued a document called the Desiderio Desiderati, which Bishop Strickland, Bishop Schneider, I think Archbishop Gracida, called it out for heresy because the document contravenes exactly the Council of Trent. Because it says the only thing needed, this is a paraphrase by the way, the only thing needed to receive Holy Communion is faith, which is exactly what Trent says is the opposite. But that was on the day that Pelosi was there. So let's talk about one of the big issues in America, and that is the one that's really hard to debate because that whole alphabet people thing, we got to T already because that was so extreme. I thought to mention that first, but let's talk about this. This was very interesting. Next, 2 slides, one more, there we go. So, do you remember this lady, Kentucky clerk, Kim Davis? Real hero, she's an evangelical lady. She had bad marriages, she converted, she had 4 kids, I think. She decided not to sign homosexual marriage certificates. Your nuncio at the time, Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, thought this was so heroic, he should bring her in to meet the Pope when he was visiting America. And so he did. Something interesting happened when she was meeting the Pope. She was told she couldn't take pictures. And that was weird because, you know, most people get to take pictures. Well, she was told she couldn't take pictures and she couldn't tell anyone about it till after the Pope left. So she didn't. After the Pope left, she was very happy that he met with her, and so she went to the media. And the media were outraged. What? Pope Francis would meet with a hater? Unbelievable! And so they went to the Vatican for comment. And at first they said, we can neither confirm nor deny the meeting. Her lawyer, who happened to be, now everybody started going on record, because the media started saying she's a liar. And then, I kid you not, the Vatican in an official release says that it wasn't a real audience with Pope Francis, and I quote, it should not be considered a form of support for her position in all of its particular and complex aspects, end quote. This is an official release from the Vatican, and I added this line. That was really weird. They said, the only official audience the Pope had was with his former student and his family. Well, next slide, please. Kim Davis, by the way, she went to jail with the 4 kids for her stand. That's why Vigano thought it was so important to bring her in. She was sued, she was allowed to be sued. I mean, it's horrible what this woman went through. Next slide. So here was the real audience. It was with his former gay student and his homosexual partner. Yes, his family consisted of his mother and sister who were there, but also with his gay partner. Ivan Bagas is his name. And it's so bizarre, I can actually show you it because you're not gonna believe this. Watch, next slide. So that's Yayo Graske's former student. I noticed there's not only photos, there's video. And guess who that is? That's, they say, boyfriend of 19 years. He doesn't look to me to be over 40. I don't know what the LinkedIn relationship looked like, but whatever. Yeah, this is his testimony of the Pope. This is America. This is, you know, when the Pope came to America and what went down. Next slide, please. Then we have this. The most well-known homosexual promoting priest in America is a Jesuit by the name of Father James Martin. Now, when the Pope first interacted with Martin and made him speaker at the World Meeting of Families, we freaked out. We were like, what? How? At the Vatican World Meeting of Families? How did they make Father James Martin? Maybe he doesn't know. Well, then he appointed him to the Pontifical Council for Social Communications. Not once, but twice. But then, he met with him in person. And Father James Martin came home and said, the Pope supports my gay ministry. We're all like, no! Even the Pope met with him, it can't mean that. Well, it turns out Father Martin wasn't lying. So Pope Francis sent a handwritten letter to Father James Martin shortly before the commencement of a outreach conference. That's his LGBT group that he started, having a conference. The group is called Outreach. And the Pope wrote him a handwritten letter, one of 5 handwritten letters the Pope has written, Martin, at least that we know of, saying, I will be spiritually with all of you united in prayer. So, next slide, please. And then, if you didn't think that was enough, he also wrote the preface, the Pope wrote the preface to James Martin's latest book. I'm kind of speechless, and I don't get speechless very often. Next slide, please. So, then the Pope did the allowance for blessings of same-sex couples. So the big debate around the world was, I didn't say couples, he said individuals. In the English version, it says individual, by the way. In the original Italian, which was originally Italian, and in every other language, I speak German, and I speak French, it's all about couples. And the African bishops rejected this document because it was about blessing couples. But here's Father James Martin. And he was so proud, he called the New York Times to come and film and photograph his blessing same-sex couples. This has nothing to do with chastity, by the way, folks. They're holding hands, these 2 guys, and he's giving this blessing. I think this couple has been, quote-unquote, married for over a decade, I think. Father James Martin has publicly encouraged homosexual couples to come and kiss in church at Sign of Peace. So we're not talking anything about the traditional teaching on marriage and family. Next, please. So we get to, I have to apologize for that. I had to show you that, as disturbing as it is, because Our Lady said something about Fatima to Lucia, but it wasn't revealed. Lucia revealed it to Cardinal Caffarra. Caffarra, when he was at our Real Life Forum in 2017 on the anniversary of Fatima, he revealed for the first time that the letter, he had already revealed the letter, but he said he believed that the times of the letter were now. And the message Our Lady gave to Lucia, who transmitted it to Cardinal Caffarra, was the final battle between the Lord and the reign of Satan will be about marriage and the family. She said, don't worry, by the way, anyone who promotes marriage and family will always be persecuted. But in the end, the Lord will triumph. We read in Genesis 3:15, she will crush his head. That's if you're reading the right version of the Bible, remember Father Nick said. But I want to read to you from the Catechism. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, the new version, article number 675. It echoes what we read at the beginning that Pope John Paul said as Bishop Wojtyła when he came to America in 76. Number 675 in the Catechism, before Christ's second coming, if you haven't read this yet, you've got to look it up, 675 in the Catechism. Before Christ's second coming, the Church must pass through a final trial that will shape the faith of many believers. The persecution that accompanies her pilgrimage on earth will unveil the mystery of iniquity in the form of a religious deception, offering men an apparent solution to their problems at the price of apostasy from the truth. The solution, my dear, dear friends, my dear mothers in America, is the woman. In the end, her immaculate heart will triumph. Do you know that she gave us the recipe? Fatima's the whole warning and the recipe. We didn't receive the full warning, but we have like hints at it now. And you can probably tell what it is from Akita anyway. There's another approved prophecy, by the way, from La Salette. One of the messages there was Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of Antichrist. So Fatima has the solution. What is it? It's very simple. It's prayer of the Holy Rosary. It's wearing the grand scapular. And it's the devotion of reparation to her Immaculate Heart. Because Jesus wants to establish the world devotion to the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary. And she gave all sorts of wonderful promises to those who practice this first 5 Saturdays. She said, at least 5. And it's very simple. Receive Holy Communion. Pray your rosary. That's 5-decade rosary. Meditate on the mysteries of the rosary for 15 minutes. Apart from the rosary, by the way. This is a meditation, kind of like Kevin was talking about, but just a contemplative one. And then, do it all in reparation for sins committed back against the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and then go to confession. That's confession within 8 days. So that's the solution. Yes, it also involves the consecration of Russia, but you know what? That's for them. The Pope's got to consecrate Russia with the bishops of the world, and there's debate if it's already been done, and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Our part is not yet done. We haven't yet done enough of what it takes to give the grace for this to happen. And it will happen. Remember when I said at the beginning how the women notice? How the first Eve noticed and the second Eve noticed? We have the solution. And in some ways, you are the solution. It is yours to tell your men, your sons, your priest sons, your husbands, and your fathers to fight. And they will fight for their souls. They will fight for the church. They will fight for their country. They will do so because you, the mothers of America, the heart of the church, with the help of God, will convince them that we have no more wine. God bless you, my friends.